Welcome to the World of Eora, a news and lore podcast about the Pillars of Eternity games, as well as Obsidian Entertainment's upcoming release, Avowed. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the World of Eora. I'm your host Eric, aka Gingerino. Thanks everyone for joining me on another episode as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics for Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 as we gear up for the release of Avowed. For those wondering why we pair all those games together, perhaps you're new to the show, welcome to the show, happy to have you here. Hopefully you're excited for Avowed, as am I, and hopefully a lot of other people listening to the show. The whole idea is that if we dive into Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, because they share the same world of Avowed, is that we can get a better appreciation for the world that the game will be set in and just appreciate the game when it finally releases and understand some of the nuances in the writing and the world that it's going to be played in. Even though, of course, we're being told that we don't need to actually play Pillars 1 or 2 to appreciate Avowed. I just think it's a more well-rounded experience. It's better, in my opinion, right? But anyways, regardless of how you're here, happy to have you here. Even if you're just into Pillars of Eternity like myself and really like to learn about the world and just geek out about it, welcome to the show. Today, we're going to be doing an episode that is kind of in line with one I've done recently. I'm going back to the Stronghold adventures from Pillars of Eternity 1, and we're going to read the stories that are there, and we're going to look at the lore that's within those stories. For a little bit of context, in case you either didn't play Pillars of Eternity 1, or if you didn't play this part of Pillars of Eternity 1, during the game of the first Pillars game, you become the owner of a stronghold, a castle, or a Lord's Keep kind of thing, called Caed Nua. And part of the ownership of Caed Nua and the stewardship of it is that you will assign duties to certain people and that you will build pieces of the castle and you will, set up infrastructure and all that. One of the things that you can do is send people that are under your employ or people that are one of your companions, you can send them on their own adventures that happen off screen from the main game. So you, the player character, are out in the region of the Deerwood where the first Pillars game is set, and then an adventure comes to your attention as the Lord of the Caed Nua Keep, and it's something that you can say, okay, you go over there, go do the thing that needs to be done. And so you send a companion to do this adventure and it happens all off screen. You, of course, will get a benefit from it. Like you'll get some money, you'll get a unique item, and you'll get some experience, things like that. As well, though, if you actually pay attention to the actual descriptions of things going on rather than just clicking through it, you'll learn that there's actually a lot of interesting stories that are going on in the background that these companions are going on. And we can learn a lot about interesting things about the world. I did an episode on this recently called Legendary Adventures of Caed Nua, and that was literally the adventures of tier Legendary. So these adventures are set up in different categories of prestige, and I've already done the Legendary class. This one is the Grand Adventures. So this is one tier down, but still the stories are just as interesting and the lore is just as interesting as well. So that's the context for what's going on here. These are a set of off-screen adventures that we can read the descriptions of and understand the world about a little bit better. It's one I really enjoy doing, and I'm going to be doing more in the future. Not in a series. This is kind of one that I just like to return to now and then. Anyway, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. No news to go over. Still looking forward to June 9th for the Xbox Games Showcase, even with all the news of things that have gone on with Xbox. I didn't say anything last episode. I did record something, but I decided that it wasn't the time or place because it was what everyone was talking about. But I'm still looking forward to the showcase. I'm guessing that Avowed is going to be there. I don't actually know, obviously, but my guess is that it'll make an appearance in some way, shape, or form. I'm hoping we can get a more solid release date alongside some video of perhaps how the story is going to work, elements like that, or maybe more in depth on the mechanics in terms of like leveling up or character creation, things like that. That's something I personally am looking forward to. And the only other news, I think, is congratulations to the makers of Pentiment and Obsidian as a whole for getting a Peabody Award. Pentiment, I believe, was it nominated or won? I think they won a Peabody Award for their work on Pentiment, and that's awesome. I thought that game was fantastic. I know a lot of other people who just can't stop talking about it even to this day, and yeah, I would say award well won, but that's still, congratulations are in order. That's everything to talk about today. Let's dive into the lore for today's episode.
I'm curious. What exactly did you find there?
Okay, so there are a total of 6 adventures in this category, and whether or not we get through all 6, I guess we'll find out, but we'll at least cover half of them today. The adventures in question are titled A Place of Great Silence, Lavender and Lie, Lover's Light, The Crossed Eye, The Waxmaker, and They Who Woke the Stars. I like the title of that last one. But we're going to start off with the first one, A Place of Great Silence. So with each of these adventures, how it's going to work is I am going to read to you the pitch, which is essentially the thing that gets your character interested in doing this off-screen quest, right? So this is the pitch that's given to you, the player character, and then you select which companion you want to go out on this off-screen adventure. And after they are gone for a number of in-game days represented by turns, they come back and you get the conclusion. So I'll be reading the pitch, which sets up the adventure, and then I'll read the conclusion, which tells you what happened during the adventure. That'll happen for each one. So, A Place of Great Silence, and here's the pitch. 5 years ago, 12 senior monks of the Ixtlochi? I-X-T-L-O-C-H-I. I'm going to go with Ixtlochi. Began a silent pilgrimage into Tlatektuan, forbidding hills plagued by... Forbidding hills? I wonder if that's supposed to say foreboding hills. But it says forbidding hills plagued by severe weather that locals are believed to be cursed by gods. The monks were supposed to emerge from the retreat this year, but they have not returned. Okay, so just the quick... That's not the whole pitch. There's more to it, but we'll just kind of go over what we're talking about now. So 5 years ago, we had 12 monks, senior monks, in the order of the Ixtlochi, which we don't know about from the in-game. So this is obviously some monk order, or it's a location that these monks come from. Went on a silent pilgrimage. Can you imagine going on a silent pilgrimage for 5 years? That is insane. That is 5 years of silence. Imagine if you had to say one word at the end of that. Your throat would probably, I don't know, your vocal cords wouldn't even work anymore. Just stay hydrated, I guess. Anyways, they went on a silent pilgrimage into a location called Tlatektuan, Tlatektuan, which is a cool sounding name. Did a search on that on the website, and I couldn't find anything else about that other than in this mention here, but really cool stuff. All of this is getting me a Shadowmill vibes. Which is a location, it's a region within the world set on the continent of the Eastern Reach. I haven't done an episode on the Shadowmill yet, and I'm interested in doing it though. But that's kind of like what this is giving me vibes of. And Tlatektuan is foreboding hills plagued by severe weather that locals believe are cursed by the gods. Why monks would want to go on a silent pilgrimage there, I don't know. Monks in this world tend to use the experience of pain as a way to sharpen and own their soul to make it do supernatural abilities and things like that. So they use pain as a way to focus their soul into doing things that normally you could not do. Perhaps that's why they went there. Anyways, they were supposed to return earlier this year, or at some point during this year, whenever that would be in the game, but they haven't returned. So the next paragraph goes, an expedition of novices into Tlatektuan discovered their camp, but were shocked to find only hollow skin shells of their masters sitting in a circle, frozen in their meditative poses. The inner circle of the Ixtlochi theorized that the masters have transcended their previous physical forms and may be wandering the Eastern Reach. They have sent word to various lords in Raed and the Deerwood that the Ixtlochi would be very much like to be reunited with their masters so their wisdom can be passed on to a new generation. Okay, so they sent an expedition of novices into these plagued hills, found the camp, and weirdly enough, they basically found the hollow skin shells of their masters. So these 12 senior monks that went on this silent pilgrimage, it's almost like they molted their skin, right? So I don't know how that would look, just like skin shells, I guess, is the best way of it. They wrote it the way they wrote it for a reason, I suppose. It's the skin shells of these 12 people just sitting around a fire in a meditative pose. And people are theorizing that they have transcended their physical forms and are now somehow wandering about the Eastern Reach, which again is the continent that this area is on. So they're hoping that maybe they can get reunited with these monks to learn their super wisdom that they have gained. So various lords in the Raed area and Deerwood. Raed is an area to the north and east of Deerwood, Deerwood being the place that the First Pillars of Eternity game is set. You don't actually get to see Raed, although Raed is very important to the history of that game. That's what's going on here in the pitch. We're going to try to I'm assuming the companion is going to try and find these 12 monks in whatever form that they are currently in, bring them back to, in some way, shape, or form, to the Ixlochai monk order. So this is the conclusion to the adventure. Companion traveled and inquired all over the Eastern Reach to track down the missing monks. One by one, the monks came across Companion's path in a variety of forms. Some were kith, some were beasts, and some were in a unique form. The word kith, Kith, refers to the main civilized races of this world, so that's humans, elves, dwarves, Amauans, Orlans, and the godlike. There are other sentient races in the world, but they're not kind of in the, I don't know what you call it, the leaderboard of the races of the world. They're not actively exploring the world, developing new technologies. They're not engaging in progressive civilization in some way, shape, or form. So anyways, yeah, those are the kith creatures. Some were kith. Some of these monks had turned into beasts, or they were in some way, shape, or form related to a beast. It's possible that their soul left their body and then attached to a beast somewhere in the world. I guess maybe we'll find out. As well as, it says here, unique forms. So whatever your mind can create, that's what that category will be for. Having apparently forgotten why they had set out on their meditation, the monks engaged Companion in a protracted series of philosophical conversations. Ultimately, each monk traveled back through their mental labyrinths they had created, triggering a spontaneous realization and subsequent, quote-unquote, molting back into their original form. When they had all returned to their monastery, they presented Companion with a chime. Each monk had donated one of the chime's 12 bells to the final instrument. And these 12 bells and this chime is the special item that you receive from completing this off-screen adventure. You get an item called the Looking Inward Chime, which is described as a beautiful chime created by 12 monks of the Ixlochai, whom you rescued from their mental labyrinths, and each chime possesses the ability to turn their user invisible once. But yeah, so the conclusion of this is that the Companion goes and locates these 12 monks in a variety of forms. Now, how the Companion does this, we have no idea, but they must have hired somebody, I imagine. Like, how do you track down the soul of a person across an entire continent? And how do you do that for 12 separate people, especially when they're not necessarily in the same form that you would think they're in? They could be in the form of a beast or another person, or, as it says here, some unique form. Like, I don't know, is that like just floating mist or something? Either way, the Companion was able to nail him down. So there is a degree to which you can track people, I think, in an ethereal sense in this world. There are people in the world like Watchers and Ciphers who might have that ability to do so. We haven't seen that thoroughly explored in Pillars of Eternity. That's one thing I would be interested in actually seeing in other stories within Eora, is like how to track souls or how to locate souls like that. You do see this a little bit with the Companion of Sagani in the first Pillars game, as she is trying to locate a creature with a person's specific soul inside of it. Because if you're not already aware, the world of Eora runs on a cycle of reincarnation. So a creature or a person has a soul that was in the body of another person in a previous generation. After locating each monk in their particular form, the Companion would then engage in a philosophical conversation with them, which would trigger what they describe here as a spontaneous realization, and they would subsequently molt back to their original form, which in an almost backwards sort of way, I guess is how I would picture it, is like they're in their ethereal spiritual form, in their non-corporeal almost form, and then all of a sudden it's almost like they shed their non-corporealness to turn back into a corporeal body, which is kind of backwards from how you might think of it. You'd think you would be physical and spiritual, and then you would shed the physical to become spiritual. But in this way, it's like you're just spiritual, and then you shed your quality of not having a physical body to now having a physical one, if this is how I'm understanding it properly. So something about navigating their mental labyrinths triggered this realization and caused them to molt back into their original form. I don't know if that means that the skin shells back at the campfire disappeared, or if those were just skin shells and, whatever, they are what they are. But either way, it's really interesting to see the connection between thought and consciousness with the soul and physical existence in this world. There's definitely been some very esoteric lore that touches on the topic of combining the physical and spiritual. There was one story about a person who tried to master teleportation, which is not a magic that is really known in the world of Eora at this point in time, but someone was determined to do it. It's easy, well, not easy, it's known that you can move the soul from one location to another, but moving the body through spiritual means as well with that soul is not something people have necessarily figured out at this point in time. You do get to see a little bit of the science of animancy experimenting with that in the second Pillars of Eternity game. You do get to hear about stuff like that in the first one. I wonder in Avowed if we might see something like that. Perhaps it'll be a very handy fast travel system. I don't know. But that is the adventure, A Place of Great Silence. And we're a fair ways into recording already, so depending on how this goes, we might only get through half of the grand adventures today, which that's all right. These are always interesting to read, and there's a lot of them to go through, and I don't want to just overload today's episode. So we're going to move on to the next one, which is called Lavender and Lie, for which we get the unique item called Lavender Wreath, which is a hat in this world. So, Lavender Lie, here is the pitch. On a remote island in the Deadfire Archipelago, which, side note, that's the setting for the second Pillars of Eternity game, the famed apothecary Tama-Watua creates potions and unguents that are renowned from Nasitak to the southern edges of the Eastern Reach. He boasts that the secret to his success is his location within the archipelago, from which he has access not only to a huge array of native creatures and plants, but also to merchants traveling from all the settled ports of the world. Lately, Tama's home and laboratory have come under attack by pirates, forcing him to flee from island to island almost every day. The apothecary's clients and Tama's many children have pled with the pirates to stop their pursuit. Receiving no sympathy, though, the pirates and no help from the mainland rulers of Abet, they have turned to mercenaries in the Eastern Reach for help. Okay, so pretty basic setup. There is a famed apothecary, Tama-Watua, who you can actually talk to, by the way, in Pillars of Eternity 2, and so we're going to take a look at them in a second here, which I like. A lot of these adventures from the Stronghold missions, you don't generally get to know a lot of the people from them, but in this case you do get to meet them in the second game. He has a problem where these pirates are raiding his home, and so he constantly is leaving his home and setting up shop somewhere else, but then he's getting raided again. He's tried to parlay with the pirates to stop, and they're just like, nah, we're not going to do it. I find it interesting. The apothecary's clients and Tama's many children have played. Okay, so Tama hasn't played with the pirates, but the apothecary's clients, so his customers and his kids. I like that it specifies his many children. You know, I don't know how normal it is to have a lot of kids in their society necessarily, but the fact that they said many children is just, I don't know, it's funny to me. Like this guy is just can't stop making the babies. You know, I suppose maybe we know why he's a famed apothecary now. Well, the potions and unguents he creates, you know, maybe they're a bit of the aphrodisiac kind. I don't know, perhaps. Or he's experimented with his own brews, and that's why he's got many children. Maybe he was trying to create maybe he was actually trying to do the opposite. He was trying to come up with like birth control or something, and it's just like, nope, that one didn't work. All right, I'll have to try again. Oh man, I don't know. There's something there. There's a joke in there somewhere. I'll let you find it yourself. But yeah, so he lives in a remote island in the Deadfire Archipelago. Deadfire Archipelago, again, setting for the second Pillars of Eternity game. Archipelago, implying that there's a lot of islands. And he's famous from Nasitak, which is just south of the Deadfire, to the Eastern Reach, which is a continent that is just, I guess, within sailing range, obviously, of the Deadfire. What we can learn about Tama-Watua himself, famed Maoan apothecary, Maoans being kind of the race of kith that live in the Deadfire Archipelago. I've done an episode on the Amawa. If you've seen the Avowed trailer from June of last year, you'll notice a kind of blue-skinned humanoid-looking creature. That is also an Amawan, but Tama is more yellow and brown tinged rather than blue and teal. His fortunes do not change by the second game. Obviously, there's going to be a conclusion to this adventure, but as it turns out, in the second game, which is years after this Lavender and Lie adventure we're talking about here, he has the misfortune of being captured while on one of his research outings. So he actually gets captured by a person named Bipara and her witches, and they didn't like him skulking around trying to steal their alchemical secrets, so he ended up getting captured by them, and you get sent on a quest to go help this guy out. So quite the character. There is a quick mention of the mainland rulers of Abet. This comes up a lot, actually, in different sources of lore for Pillars of Eternity, is this nation of Abet, A-B-E-T. We do not know a lot about Abet. We never actually go there in either of the games. They're just mentioned only, but there seems to be a lot of lore about them, as if Obsidian meant to do more. Apparently, and this is sourced off of Josh Sawyer's Tumblr page, the Frog Helms fan club. Apparently, at one point, they wanted to develop this mainland culture of a bet outside of Pillars of Eternity to Deadfire, which is set on a series of islands. But none of it's canon, and it never got developed into the game. I guess they must have thought along the lines that it was going to take away too much from the narratives of Deadfire already, so they never put it. But it would have been an interesting Orlan-run empire consisting of Cypher ruling classes. It would have been a pretty interesting place to explore, and just based off of what it sounds like the concept was, there is some interesting narratives they could have told, but we don't know anything about them, unfortunately. One thing, though, that is interesting, in June 2023 trailer for Avowed, where we see Kai, the Amauan, there is a small, short scene where the player character is walking along this port, and we can see in the background a whole bunch of banners and flags. And the flag that I'm seeing here on the Pillars of Eternity fandom website is one of the flags that is in that background. I unfortunately cannot find the reference for where this flag comes from in game, like how the Wikipedia contributor associated these two things, but hopefully this is an indication that a bet will be in Avowed, or at least there'll be a liaison or an envoy or an emissary of that nation, and we can learn more about them. And I can finally do an episode on them. But anyways, though, that's just some side lore. Let's conclude this adventure, which, I mean, thankfully we had some side lore to talk about, because there's actually not a lot here lore-wise to chat about. The conclusion of this adventure is, joining 5 other Eastern Reach mercenaries, Companion became a passenger on an Amauan longship. Swift and full of weapon-bearing sailors, the ship came into regular conflict with pirates during the pursuit of Tama's kidnappers. Eventually, Companion and the crew spotted the Valian caravel holding Tama and were able to overtake it before it reached the open water. With grapples and a fair share of acrobatics, the mercenaries and Amauan sailors boarded the caravel, with Companion in tow. The battle on the ship's deck was so thick with pistol fire that the smoke made it difficult to tell friend from foe. In the confusing melee, Companion came face to face with the pirate captain. In the subsequent scuffle, the longship collided with the caravel and it sent it lurching. The captain slid down the length of the deck and was knocked overboard by a poorly secured cannon. With their leader sinking beneath the waves, the remaining pirates quickly surrendered or dove into the water in an attempt to escape to a nearby island. Upon Tama's return, his friends and family held a huge feast to honor him. Companion, and everyone else that's helped, saved him. So it pretty much just tells the story of how your companion that you sent to do this adventure found this person. There's not really much to talk about here. Pirates are a normal thing in the Deadfire Archipelago. They are largely the remnants of a society from Old Valia, which is an ancient empire. Well, not ancient, but an old empire that has since then collapsed. We don't really know any lore about like longships or anything like that. Well, we know a little bit about the construction of some of that stuff, but not enough that we need to get into it. But yeah, it's just kind of the story of what happens there. For all of your work, you get the Lavender Wreath, which is a beautiful lavender wreath, a gift from the famed Amauan apothecary Tama Wuta. He made it at a feast after you rescued him from Valian mercenaries in the Deadfire Archipelago. Despite the age of the lavender, it still smells fresh. So this is a unique item that you get from that. It makes you immune to being sickened, and yeah. Alright, next up is Lover's Light, of which you will get 2 rings, Copper Lover's Ring and the Silver Lover's Ring. And based off the timing of how this is going, we'll probably only have enough time for this one. Maybe one more. Hopefully one more. That'd be nice. But yeah, so this is the off-screen companion adventure, Lover's Light. For the last 2 years, sailors on the Grace of Chiamena have sent a pair of lights dancing over the waves late at night. Those who have come close have reported hearing 2 women's voices singing a song of unparalleled beauty. Some believe they are the souls of Alessa and Pelan, ill-fated lovers from a century ago who were cast out of Enchenze by a mob and driven from the cliffs to their death. Enchenze's duchess condemned the mob's actions, but the unsympathetic Sangreta Ducala did little to punish the offenders. Since the rumors about the lights have spread, romantic Valians have gone to the cliffs or even rowed small boats out on the shore at night to catch a glimpse of the spirits. Enchenze's new duke is doing his best to curb this behavior, but he believes the only true remedy will be putting the spirits to rest. No small task, given when and where they appear. Okay, so here's the setup. There is this ship called the Grace of Chiamena. I don't know what Chiamena references. I think that's a city in the Valian Republics, which is a a series of city-state confederacies south of the Deerwood on the Eastern Reach continent. They're mainly comprised of Vailian culture people. We don't get to go there in the first Pillars of Eternity game. It's just something that we learn about. I've done episodes on all this if you're interested in the Vailian republics or anything related to that. So we have this ship, Grace of Chiamena, and the sailors have been reporting seeing these dancing lights over the waves at night. And apparently there are 2 women's voices singing songs of unparalleled beauty over there. It's believed that they are the souls of Alessa and Pelaine, which were ill-fated lovers from nearly a century ago that were cast out of Achenze. Achenze is a city in the Vailian republics. Now, we're not told in this section why they were driven out, but my guess is, although we don't see this a lot in Pillars of Eternity, so I could very well be wrong about this, is that we're hearing 2 women's voices. So Alessa and Pelaine were lovers, and they were women. I don't know if there was some homophobia going on here, like maybe the people of Achenze drove them out and cast them off of a cliff because of that. Or it just says here that they were ill-fated lovers, so perhaps it was just a familial thing. Maybe we don't actually get to know, and there's no reason for us as player characters to know. I might be reading into it too much, right? But anyways, Achenze's Duchess has condemned the mob's actions for doing this a long time ago, but the unsympathetic Sangreta Ducala did little to punish the offenders. The Duchess is the leader of the city of Achenze, so she's basically, the mayor of the city. The Sangreta Ducala, or the Sangreta for short, is the council of leaders, right? So the Sangreta Ducala will be made up of other dukes and duchesses from different cities or regions in the Vailian republics. It sounds like the Duchess of Achenze condemned the actions of this, but the entire council did very little to actually follow through on the condemning and punish the people. For whatever reason, Achenze's new duke, not a duchess, a new duke, is trying to curb this behavior of Vailians going out at night in their romantic culture that they have, and singing to one another or just having romantic times out at night. Not sure why. Maybe because it's dangerous. Maybe it's killing people. I don't know. But either way, he's trying to stop that. So, the conclusion to this adventure. A priest of Andra and a crew of greedy sailors were all it took to row Companion out to the spot where Alessa and Pelaine's ghosts were singing. Unfortunately, the chaos of the storm overturned the small boat. Companion, the priest, and the sailors were all plunged deep into the Grace of Chiamena. Okay, so it turns out I was wrong. The Grace of Chiamena must be a section, it must be a region of water within the ocean here. I don't know if it's a strait or a bay or what it is. It's a region or a section of water within the ocean near the city of Achenze. But they were plunged deep into this area. Miraculously, most of them emerged in a great sea cave near Barda, which is another location in this world, presumably. Though the entrance of the cave was hidden from the surface, the interior held wonders that had not been seen for generations. Sunken warships, trade vessels, and remnants of the unlucky travelers that had fallen victim to the Grace in the past. Companion and the ragtag group discovered a tribe of survivors that had persevered in the caves through cannibalism and limited raiding. Their extensive time in the cave had left them unintelligible and wild. Though some attacked the crew of the recently sunk boat, Companion was able to scare the others off. So it sounds like a lot of people have... It sounds like the Grace of Chiamena, this region in the ocean, is dangerous and not very good for sailing, and a lot of them have crashed onto this island and get stuck in this sea cave, because they have this tribe of survivors, is what it's described as here. So people have survived this, and whether I don't know how long they've been here for, long enough to kind of become unintelligible wild people and engage in cannibalism and limited raiding. Yeah, it sounds like quite the story. It's like one of those YouTube specials that you watch. I mean, or I guess it could be on Netflix or something. I don't know. My wife watches a lot of interesting YouTube documentary stuff about people who got lost at sea or things that happened within American history or something like that. Gruesome stories of the especially relating to cannibalism, because there's that one, what's her name? Caitlin, the YouTuber, the mortician. She's done a few on that, and so there's always some interesting stories there. Anyways, that's besides the point. That's not what you're here to listen to. Eventually, the group found their way to a pile of bones that contained the remains of Alessa and Pelaine. The Andrite priest buried the pair together and performed a service over the bodies. With that, the spirits retreated from the world and towards the beyond, capital B beyond, which is this world's version of the afterlife, if you will. All right, so some lore here in the conclusion. A priest of Andra. Andra is one of the 11 gods of this world's pantheon. Every fantasy world needs its own pantheon of gods, and Eora has one as well. Andra is the goddess of forgetfulness, the ocean, the moon, and grief, to name a few of her divine domains. Other than that, there's not a lot here that we haven't already discussed, like the locations of cities and names in this area of the ocean, and what might have happened to the people living on the island. It's interesting that, again, we're seeing this event happen where you're able to find the bones of these people. If there were a lot of bones on this island, how do you discover that, oh, these bones belong to these particular people? Because they don't have the technology that we're familiar with right now, anyways, as we are, to be able to kind of like do that backwards kind of a thing of like identifying bones to a particular person, especially since they didn't know what they look like. So how do you identify these bones? My only guess is that they were somehow able to detect the essence, which is the stuff spirits are made of. It's the stuff that your soul is made of in this world, that they were somehow able to detect the essence of this and identify it as that. Because, it's the soul. Perhaps you can ask it, like, what's your name? And it'll tell you. So there must have been some way that they did that. So we have another instance here of tracking souls and interacting with them in some way. Perhaps the priest did it, or maybe there was a watcher somewhere on the crew. I doubt that last part, but perhaps the priest was able to do some more work. And they were able to perform a service for the bodies, burying them, and their spirits moved on to the beyond, which is an interesting idea, right? Like, I think that we see that story, that motif, a lot of like, well, you put the angry spirit in their grave, and they're finally at rest, and they move on, right? And then the episode ends for whatever TV show you're watching. But as in the world of Eora, I'm curious as to like what does that do to allow the spirits to move on? How do they even know that? Because there is a detachment from the body and the soul a lot of times in this world. There's definitely the idea that a person dies, their soul will leave their body, and then there's really no connection left to the body at all for that particular soul. At least that's how I get a lot of the narratives as when I read it. That's obviously not uniform across every death in the world of Eora. So obviously, in this particular instance, there was still an attachment that they had. Perhaps it was the state of their death and their anguish that kept them connected to that area. And it wasn't until that they were buried that they felt a sense, I guess, of peace. I'm not really sure. But it's always interesting to think through that stuff, because it's not, like I said, uniform across the world of Eora that way. The rewards you get for this adventure, by the way, are the Copper Lover's Ring and the Silver Lover's Ring. Copper Lover Ring described, this ring is heavy and rough hewn. It looks like it was cast from a poorly refined lump of copper. Tiny impurities still glisten around the band. Given the obvious tool marks, it appears to have been made by amateur rather than professional jeweler. And the Silver Lover's Ring is the same thing, except silver instead of copper. And yeah, as you can guess, these are almost certainly the rings that belonged to these two lovers, which it's where you bury them so that they are at peace, but you steal their jewelry. You steal these pieces of jewelry that represents their love for each other, and they're still like, nah, we're fine. You can have it. Go ahead, take it. It's okay. We don't really have a lot of time left. At least I don't have a lot of time left. Yeah, screw it. We're going to do one more anyways. We're going to do one more because, damn it, I love this stuff, and hopefully you do too. I mean, you're listening to this show, and you got this far, so certainly you enjoy this to some level of degree. All right, we're going to finish off with this last one here. This is called the Crossed Eye, and the reward for this is an item called the Crossed Patch. So, the pitch for the Crossed Eye: in the Court of Bowing Ashes. It's already pretty awesome to read. I don't know what the Court of Bowing Ashes is off the top of my head. It sounds like a location, like a specific location, perhaps like a ritualistic site or a religious place, or just the name of an area in a city. I don't know. In the Court of Bowing Ashes stands a towering Audra statue intertwined with living trees, dating back to the Ingwithans. It is believed to represent an Orlan ruler of that lost empire. Interesting. Okay. So, Court of Bowing Ashes is a place, and inside this place is a towering Audra statue intertwined with living trees. Audra in this world is a unique gemstone that exists. The very interesting thing about Audra is that, well, it's in large veins, in large quantities. Like, it's not just this like small vein of gemstone that you take out in tiny little jewel pieces. It's just a huge piece of gemstone. Theoretically speaking, actually, all mineral deposits of Audra through the entirety of Eora are connected as one giant piece. Just deep underground is where they unite to each other. The other interesting thing about this gemstone is that it is also capable of housing soul energy within it. So you can put essence, the stuff souls are made of, into Audra. It makes it a very, very important part of the narratives in these games. Expect to hear a lot about Audra in Avowed. Anyways, so there's this towering Audra statue, and it's intertwined with living trees, and it dates back to the Ingwithan times. Ingwithans are a civilization of people. They were very advanced. They lived a couple millennia ago or something like that, and they mysteriously disappeared. They had all these advancements in things that they were doing, and they were worldwide nearly in their influence and impact and progression, and then they just disappeared. And I'm not going to get into anything about them. That's for another episode I've done, or if you want to play the games. But they were very, very important for the narratives of Avowed. A lot of what they did when they were a thriving society impacts even the stuff that's going on in the modern times for Pillars of Eternity and Avowed. And this statue is believed to represent an Orlan ruler of the Lost Empire. So that's something we learn here, is that there is supposedly an Orlan ruler in the Ingwithan society. At one point in time, an Orlan was in charge, which is interesting to hear because you don't hear that a lot in the modern times of Pillars of Eternity. In fact, Orlans are usually on the receiving end of a lot of discrimination and racism. So we don't know the name of this person or if this was a common thing or what they did, but apparently there's an Orlan ruler of the Ingwithans at one point in time. That's cool. Good to know. Though the natural progress of time has done some damage to it, the Glonfathans remember one act of vandalism against it from an early colonial day. During the chaos of the Broken Stone War, Aedir explorers ventured deep into Air Glonfath, made their way into the Court of Bowing Ashes, and scaled the statue to break loose a single eye, large as an Amauan's head and made out of pure Adraban. Most of the members of that band were captured and killed by the Glonfathans, but the eye has never been recovered. Okay, so there's a whole bunch here to go through. The Glonfathans are people that live in the tribal nation of Air Glonfath. The Glonfathan tribes of Air Glonfath, they are the people, the native tribes who live on the Eastern Reach continent, which we've talked about a couple times already. So they've been living on this continent as the native tribes here. And there's a long-standing history between them and the colonists from other empires that have crossed the sea onto the Eastern Reach, most notably the Empire of Aedir, which, side note, your main player character in Avowed is going to come from Aedir. So anyways, there was one particular war called the Broken Stone War, which is named as such because an Aediran farmer colonist knocked over a pillar of Audra, or broke this pillar of Audra near one of these sacred ruin sites, and that just triggered a whole bunch of already kind of existing tensions, and a war broke out between the Glonfathans and the Aediran colonists. But as part of the Broken Stone War, there were these explorers that went to Air Glonfath, the tribal nation where they were, and they made their way to the Court of Bowing Ashes. So it sounds to me like Court of Bowing Ashes is actually the name of one of these Ingwithan ruins, which again, Glonfathans consider the Ingwithan ruins that are dotting the Deerwooden area, they consider them very sacred, to the point like they will defend it to the death. So these people broke into the Court of Bowing Ashes, scaled this statue that we talked about, and they broke loose the jeweled eye that would have been in there. And it's described as being as big as an Amauan's head, which is like a very big head, a bigger than normal head, made of pure Adraban, which I can't find the page for it. If I remember correctly, it's essentially white Audra. Audra is normally green in color. If I remember correctly, Adraban is white. I can't remember what makes it white, if it's just because there's no essence inside of it at the time, and that's why it's white, or if there's something corrupted about it. I can't remember exactly. If anyone does remember, send me email, worldofeora@gmail.com, or hit me up on Twitter @worldofeora. But yeah, so that's what's going on there. So these people were eventually captured and killed by the Glonfathans, but the eye had already, crossed hands, and they never found it again. So in recent years, rumors have spread through the Eastern Reach that a new owner of the eye had been attempting to sell it through covert markets. The Anamfatha of at least 3 tribes would reward anyone who recovers it. So the word owner is in quotations because it was stolen, right? So it's obviously not being owned by people in legal senses. The Amanfatha is the name of the ruling council in Air Glonfath. That's what they call their governmental council, if you will, Amanfatha. Okay, so now the conclusion to this adventure. It took extensive searching and inquiry across 3 countries, but Companion eventually picked up the trail of the stolen Adraban eye. Following the Broken Stone War, the Amauan thief traveled south to Abet. So that's one thing we learned here, is that the thief from a deer was an Amawan. You don't usually see a ton of Amawans as Adirans. It's mostly comprised of meadow humans or folk and wood elves, which is why a lot of people are theorizing that in Avowed you can only play a human or an elf, because they're the main races you see in that society. But we do see here the Amawan thief traveled south. So I guess it was an Amawan who is also a Diran. Anyway, so he stole the Adraban, traveled south to Abet, then on to Nasitak, which I mentioned earlier is south of the Deadfire Archipelago, among the Boreal dwarves who live in Nasitak. The thief found a wealthy buyer, the chief of a prosperous tribe. A generation later, the tribe fell on hard times and was raided by Deadfire Archipelago pirates and pale elves from the White That Wends. The White That Wends is basically like this world's version of Antarctica, except people can live there. And the pale elves are the primary race that live there. Almost exclusively, that's where pale elves live. They don't generally live anywhere else, and that's where they all come from. There's a whole history that's very interesting going on there, but I don't have time to get into it here. The pale elves sold the stolen eye to merchants from Old Valia. Old Valia is one of the old empires of this world. So I've mentioned Adir, which is the empire that your player character in Avowed comes from. Adir has existed for a few hundred years, and so it's called one of the old empires. Another example of an old empire is Rawatai, has also existed for a few hundred years in a different location in the world. Another old empire is Old Valia. However, Old Valia, since a few hundred years ago in this world's history, has collapsed. The civilization is no more. In fact, most of the ancestors of Old Valia are now part of the pirate confederation that we see in the second Pillars of Eternity game. So they took this, the Pale Elves sold the eye to merchants in Old Valia. They took it north to a prince of Darkozi, one of the families of Old Valia, and it remained there for 2 generations. So now we're kind of catching up to modern times. When Darkozi Palace was sacked, one of the invading soldiers took the eye as a prize, carrying it across the sea to Ozia in the Valian republics. It was still there when Companion arrived. Though the wealthy patriarch who owned the eye commanded a hefty sum, the Glanfathan Amenfatha did not hesitate to pay the price. So the last little bit there, Darkozi is either it's a city or it's a family or both, and their palace was sacked during the collapse of their society, and one of the soldiers just took the eye, brought it back to Ozia, one of the cities within the Valian republics that I've talked about, and they bought it back, and there you go. As a reward for all of your work, you get something called the Crossed Patch, which is a hat item. It makes you inaccurate because it's it's basically an eye patch. It goes over your eye, but you are immune to the blinded status effect, and it does give you a sneak attack bonus. It's described as a patch that was a gift from Glanfathan Amenfatha, a reward for your help in recovering a precious Adraban eye that was stolen from a sculpture during the Broken Stone War. Like the original eye, the patch features a cross on its surface. That's new information right there. So I guess the Adraban eye had an X over the eye. I don't know if that's significant or not, but whatever. Okay, that's all we're going to talk about today. As far as recording goes, I'm just under an hour, but I'm sure I'll be cutting a lot of the meat out and the silences and the looking up of stuff. But yeah, so that's everything for today's episode. Thanks everyone for listening, and I hope these kind of episodes are enjoyable to you. I know some of you have responded to me saying you really like these kind of episodes, almost like little anthologies of lore stories, and I do too. Honestly, the Stronghold adventures were one of the first things to really get me into lore of this world, and also because they were really good inspiration for tabletop role-playing game. Like, you have the pitch for the adventure, and you have even a conclusion that could happen. So I find that it's actually, if you're trying to, especially play within this world, this is a good place to start. And a good timing for me to stop, too, because it's now starting to thunder outside. So if you happen to hear that, I apologize. I'm not going to try to wait for in-between lightning strikes. You're just going to have to put up with it. Anyways, that's all we're talking about on today's episode. Nothing left for me to talk about. I have been playing the Outer Worlds still. I have finished the Groundbreaker section of the game, which is like the second main area you go into. I've gone back to the main planet to go back to the Roseway to look for all the secrets and stuff. I'm being very thorough as I go through the game, and I've already found a couple side quests that I missed. The really small ones, like one of them was to go find a cigarette case for this lady, Lillian. And so yeah, that's been fun. Not much to talk about there, just really enjoying the Outer Worlds again. But yeah, it's going to be longer than I remember it being. But hey, that's what happens when you're being very thorough. I did try out Little Kitty Big City, which, whatever. Think what you will of me playing that game. But honestly, it's such a charming little game. The city is not big. It says little kitty big city, but it's not a huge city, but it's very dense. There's a lot going on, and you can't go 5 feet in the game without finding something to interact with or explore or do. It's definitely got chill vibes, but it's got an overall goal that you're very slowly kind of putting together. It's been a relaxing experience. I would almost put it in kind of like the vein of a short hike, except obviously from a different perspective. A little bit more glitches and bugs though. But the idea that you're trying to find these items which give you more energy so that you can climb higher kind of a thing. Then you're just interacting with interesting characters as you go. It's funny, it's chill, it's relaxing. So if anything like that sounds of interest to you, by all means, check it out. It's on Game Pass, right? So that's how I've been playing it. One game, though, I really want to check out, and if anyone's played it, don't tell me anything spoilery, or there's nothing I could do, but, if I could, I would do something bad to you, is Animal Well. Keep hearing about Animal Well being compared to the likes of Fez and Tunic and Outer Wilds, all 3 of which are on my top 10 for games that I think are the greatest ever. So I need to play this game, but I'm dedicated to finishing Outer Worlds first, and then I want to jump into Pillars of Eternity 2 after that, so we'll see. I might kind of balance the two later on, but if anyone else has been playing that game and you just want to say something, non-spoiler, please, about that, then by all means, send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com, as well if you just have questions about the show or anything going on, or about the world, or any topics that you'd like, or you just like to strike up a conversation. Perhaps you have an opinion on the recent closures with Tango and Arcane, Roundhouse, and Alpha Dog, which I won't beat to death with a stick. I know everyone's already talked about it 100 times. I personally am pretty upset about it. Not because it has anything to do with me personally, but it's A, a lot of people lost their jobs, and that sucks. But also B, I feel like those studios didn't need to be closed. There must have been a way that they could have just been I think the word is divested, but they could have given them the option of hey, we're not going to close you down, but we're not going to keep you under our roof anymore either, so you can either get closed down or go about it on your own, which I know is not the best option, but at least it would have given them something, right? So I'm upset that they didn't really have a chance. It's you sign on with this big corporation, and I'm not anti-Xbox, I'm not anti-Microsoft, okay? I wasn't in the committee that had to make the decision. I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision. I'm sure no one was happy to make that choice, and they made these choices for a reason. It's I wasn't in there for that, so I'm not anti Microsoft and all that. I'm mad about the choice, but I wasn't there, so I don't feel like I have the right to adjudicate anything there. But still, I'm grumpy about that. I know that Tango did a great job with Hi-Fi Rush. Personally, I'm not getting the vibe that Hi-Fi Rush had anything to do with Tango getting shut down. I think it was just that they looked at all they had to cut costs, they looked at all the options, and Tango fit the bill in some category. I don't think Hi-Fi Rush was a particular factor. It didn't do good enough, so they shut them down. I don't think that that's the case. That doesn't seem to make sense. But in my opinion, it should have counted for something. They should have been hey, you know what? They made a great game for us within the last year, so we won't shut them down. But then again, if they didn't get shut down, someone else might have. So, it's a no-win scenario. Okay, that was not supposed to be a tangent that I went on, but whatever. There it is. I'm sure the boys at Avowedcast will probably chat about it on the next recording, so maybe you can get more thoughts there from us if you care at all, whatever. Anyways, sorry about that. Returning back to all the social pluggings, worldofeora@gmail.com. Twitter is @worldofeora if you want to do something there. If you want to support the show, don't feel like you have to, just there if you want to, ko-fi.com/worldofeora. Thanks for putting up with my random side tangent there. A lot of gamers, just like myself, had a strong reaction to that, and I'm one of them. So if you have strong feelings, I am genuinely interested in what you have to say. So that's everything. Thanks everyone for listening to this episode today, where we read through some of the off-screen companion adventures from Pillars of Eternity 1 and explored the lore of what's going on in the world a little bit more. We learned about some monk orders in a place called Ixlochi or Tetlatuchicoan. I can't remember anymore, and the words aren't in front of me. We've learned about we learned about a lot today. I'm not going to recount it for you. Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. I had a great time. I've been your host, Eric, aka Gingerino, and I'll see you guys next time.